It's Thursday, February 6th, 2025. Gender ideology is on the ropes. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, hits the ground running at the Justice Department. And Congresswoman Nancy Mace is useful every now and then. Next on the AM Update.
With my action this afternoon, we're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza.
How did America get to the point where we're sending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars abroad to NGOs that are dedicated to spreading atheism all over the globe?
The movement to impeach the president has begun.
And let me please finish without interruption. And
tranny. I don't really care. You want penises in women's bathrooms, and I'm not going to have it.
okay.
Gender ideology is on the ropes. President Donald Trump appears committed to delivering a knockout punch. He promised in 2023 to bring an end to left-wing gender insanity. Well, he signed an executive order last afternoon banning male so-called transgenders, see that as boys pretending to be girls, from competing in girls' or women's sports.
With my action this afternoon, we're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding.
Trump was flanked by oodle scores of girls and women, some of whom were notable Save Women's sports advocates, including Jennifer Say of XXXY Athletics and Riley Gaines, former collegiate swimmer who was forced to swim against another dude who felt pretty. It was just an amazing scene as Donald Trump was flanked by those, some of them very young girls, as he signed this executive order. Trump also indicated that he's instructed Secretary of State Marco Rubio to make it clear to the International Olympic Committee that America will no longer tolerate men in women's sports at home or abroad. Of course, LGBTQ or whatever activists and other radicals are incensed over this decision. Trump's order reflects the desire of the supermajority of Americans. A 2023 Gallup survey found that 69% of Americans wanted trannies to play on sports teams that corresponded with their actual sex. Now, that term I just dropped, trannies, that's considered a slur in the so-called LGBTQIAFU community. More on that later with Nancy Mace. Also at the White House yesterday, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt provided a few more details about Trump's plans for Gaza. Here's the question she was asked.
His entire public career criticizing foreign entanglements, nation building, sending American troops to fight abroad, particularly in the Middle East. This plan seems like it could ultimately involve all of those things. Can you explain this reversal and how building and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad. The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region. And as I said in my opening remarks, we've had the same people pushing the same solutions to this problem for decades. And it's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
The rancor continues over the Department of Government Efficiency and USAID.
We will fight their violation of civil service laws. We will fight their violation of civil rights laws. We will fight their violations of separation of powers.
That is a very constipated-sounding Senator Cory Booker outside of the U.S. Capitol earlier this week. Back at the White House, Caroline Leavitt just unveiled the latest discovery, not only of DOGE, but of USAID, and just why Democrats are so up in arms.
So upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOGE team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort.
Yes, you heard that right. The Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, ostensibly via USAID, that's the topic du jour this week, discovered that no fewer than $8 million of taxpayer money had been doled out to subsidize subscriptions to the website, very left-leaning news website, Politico. That is right. But that's not the only thing that USAID has been funding. Here is Vice President J.D. Vance yesterday at the Religious Freedom Institute 2025 Summit.
How did America get to the point where we're sending hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars abroad to NGOs that are dedicated to spreading atheism all over the globe? That is not what leadership on protecting the rights of the faithful looks like. And it ends with this administration. And I'd add that part of our protecting religious freedom initiatives means recognizing in our foreign policy the difference between regimes that respect religious freedom and those that do not. The United States must be able to make that distinction. We must be able to look at the catastrophes, like the plight of Iraq's Christians over the past 3 decades, and possess the moral clarity to act when something has gone wrong.
Other news, CBS and the Federal Communications Commission on Wednesday released the unedited version of the network's controversial 60 Minutes interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris. The Tiffany Network published 2 never-before-seen excerpts from the sit-down, which President Donald Trump has alleged was deceptively edited to help the Democratic nominee in her failed bid for the White House. The New York Post reported earlier this week that FCC Chairman Brendan Carr planned to put the investigation into high gear after CBS News handed over the full transcript of the Harris interview on Monday. Carr vowed to launch a probe following a complaint by the Center for American Rights, a right-leaning activist group, which argued the long-running television news magazine favorably edited the October sit-down with the 2024 Democratic Party presidential nominee. The FCC is investigating whether CBS News exhibited political bias against Trump and the Republican Party during the 2024 cycle. Networks using public airwaves are subject to federal regulation requiring fairness and equal time provisions, unlike cable networks, which do not face the same constraints. If Carr finds evidence of misleading editing, it could impact regulatory approval of the Paramount Skydance merger, potentially leading to conditions that enforce editorial balance. That's a story to keep an eye on. Attorney General Pam Bondi was sworn in yesterday morning.
I will restore integrity to the Justice Department, and I will fight violent crime throughout this country and throughout this world and make America safe again.
Well, Attorney General Bondi is wasting no time. She's issuing several major directives on her first day leading the Justice Department, including orders to combat the weaponization of the legal system, make prosecutors seek the death penalty when appropriate, and work with the Department of Homeland Security to completely eliminate cartels and transnational criminal organizations. Bondi was confirmed by the Senate on Tuesday night as Attorney General. Bondi issued a directive regarding zealous advocacy. Bondi said DOJ attorneys' responsibilities include aggressively enforcing criminal laws passed by Congress, but also vigorously defending presidential policies and actions on behalf of the United States against legal challenges. Included in her first day of actions, she's directing the Department of Justice to halt federal funding to sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement agents. President Trump had alluded to plans to defund sanctuary cities in an interview with Fox News 2 days after he was inaugurated, stating that he might have to cut federal funding to cities that shield illegal aliens from deportation. A court ruled in Trump's favor in 2020, finding that his DOJ was legally allowed to deny grants to cities that refused to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement agents. A map of sanctuary cities compiled by the Center for Immigration Studies reveals that various cities across the country, including Lansing, Michigan, New York, Richmond, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, Maryland, along with numerous other cities, refused to cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement agents in the past. Entire states such as California, Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado have also adopted sanctuary policies to protect illegals from deportations. Counties in conservative states like Tennessee, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nebraska have also adopted similar policies as well, while some regional jail systems have similarly refused to comply with ICE detainer requests for illegals who've been charged with a crime. So this is obviously a good sign. Pam Bondi, Attorney General, off to a rousing start, taking action right away. When we come back, Joe Biden signs with the talent agency because why not? The most boring soundbite you'll hear this week, and Milton Friedman revisited.
What do you think about Joe Biden signing on with the talent agency?
You gotta be kidding. He signed on with the talent agency?
Yes, he's got some entertainment agents now.
I think he's got bigger problems than that. I really do. I think he's got much bigger problems than that, but I wish him well.
Yeah, former President Joe Biden has signed with the powerhouse talent agency CAA, joining its star-studded ranks of Hollywood actors and sports legends as he explores what comes after the White House. For some reason, you heard President Trump reacting to the news, saying it's kind of bizarre. It is bizarre indeed. Creative Artists Agency, that's CAA, said in an Instagram post earlier this week it represented Biden from 2017 to 2020 after his 8-year term as vice president. Biden published his memoir, Promise Me, Dad, and launched a book tour that sold more than 85,000 tickets nationwide during his previous stint with the talent agency. The roster of this talent agency ranges from actress Meryl Streep and lifestyle mogul Martha Stewart to Japanese baseball superstar Shohei Ohtani. So Joe Biden, he's not dead yet. Haven't heard much from him recently, but he's signing with the talent agency because having pudding for brain is a talent. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Congressman Al Green of Texas. Here he is. He's got one hit, and he's playing it over and over again.
How such things would be said. Ethnic cleansing has been a crime against humanity. And I stand here today in the well to denounce what was said, to denounce what the president said, to denounce the complicity of the Prime Minister of Israel, and to remind people that Dr. King was right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And injustice in Gaza is a threat to justice in the United States of America. I rise to announce that the movement to impeach the president has begun. I rise to announce that I will bring articles of impeachment against the president for dastardly deeds proposed and dastardly deeds done.
Is that over with? They're doing articles of impeachment again. Okay, whatever. Moving on. Check out this exchange. Congresswoman Nancy Mace. I heard this recently, and it is actually kind of sad. I do feel genuinely sad for her. Yes, she is a part of the problem when it comes to individuals that should not be, or who should not be in spaces where they don't belong. In this context, of course, we're talking about men who should not be in women's spaces. That was the executive order that President Trump signed yesterday. But, of course, she shattered the glass ceiling as the first female cadet at the Citadel, a formerly all-men's prestigious military academy in South Carolina. The backstory here is that her father was a very high-up ranking member at the Citadel. And essentially the story goes that Nancy Mace's entire career is one long daddy issue, and that's very sad. That's the main reason. She wanted her father's admiration and respect, and that's the reason that she got into the Citadel. She was invading a men's-only space. But on the issue of so-called transgenderism, she's been a bulldog. Check out this exchange during a committee meeting at the House of Representatives yesterday, where Nancy Mace absolutely obliterates this dude who talks with somewhat of a lisp, talking about LGBT slurs.
The gentlelady has used a phrase that is considered a slur in the LGBTQ community and the transgender community. And let me please finish without interruption. And
Tranny. I don't really care. You want penises in women's bathrooms, and I'm not going to have it.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Let the gentleman state his parliamentary inquiry.
To me, a slur is a slur. And here in the committee, a level of decorum requires us to try consciously to avoid slurs. You just heard the gentlelady actually actively, robustly repeat it. And I would just ask the chairman that she be counseled that we ought not to be engaged. We can have debate and policy discussion without offending human beings who are our fellow citizens. And so I would ask, as a parliamentary inquiry, whether the use of that phrase is not, in fact, a violation of the decorum rules.
Mr. Chair.
That is the voice of Congressman Connolly of Virginia, Congressman Jerry Connolly of Virginia. You can't use this. It's a slur. It's a slur. She's making my homosexual staffer who's wearing a face mask sitting behind me very uncomfortable. Listen to the rest of this.
Chairman, I'm not going to be counseled by a man over men and women's spaces or men who have mental health issues dressing as women. I'm not being counseled by some guy.
My inquiry is to the chairman,
okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Order.
The chairman of this council, the chairman of this committee, I should say, is James Comer, a Republican. Listen to this.
Inquiry is about decorum. Decorum is at the discretion of the chair.
That's
I will be
mansplaining,
honest,
Mr. Chairman.
with the ranking member. I'm not up to date on my politically correct LGBTQ terminology. We'll look into that.
That is just disgusting from James Comer there. Their correct answer is, get the hell out of here with that. I don't give a whit what your feelings say about that word. Instead, I'm not. This is a Republican. I'm not up to date with politically correct words for LGBT community. Please don't hurt me. Nancy Mace has more testosterone in her left pinky finger than I'm convinced James Comer has in his whole being or has ever had. This is the world of politics strange bedfellows, or whatever the female term for fellow is. With Nancy Mace, who has more courage, apparently more conviction. Maybe she's just doing this for clicks. Maybe that's probably Occam's razor. Nevertheless, she's shown more fearlessness than about 97% of the Republican caucus in Washington, D.C. on this issue. She joins the 3% of like Donald Trump, a handful of congressmen, and like 4 senators. So again, Nancy Mace, not a moral person. She said that herself. Has kind of a walking, talking contradiction about her on the issue of invading spaces where certain people should not be, meaning males should not be or females should not be in her case. But nonetheless, on this issue, she is an absolute bulldog. The U.S. Postal Service said Wednesday it's going to resume accepting inbound mail and packages from China and Hong Kong just hours after it suspended service from those regions. The agency wrote in a notice posted to its website, the USPS and Customs and Border Protection are working closely together to implement an efficient collection mechanism for new China tariffs to ensure the least disruption to package delivery. USPS announced late Tuesday it would stop accepting parcels from China and Hong Kong posts until further notice. The move came after Donald Trump on Saturday imposed an additional 10% tax on Chinese goods as part of a sweeping change in tariffs on the country's top 3 trading partners. Trump on Monday agreed to hold off on imposing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for 30 days. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency had said it processed more than 1.3 billion de minimis shipments in 2024. Those are small shipments, or at least small value shipments from China. A 2023 report from the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party found that Temu and Shine, those are 2 very cheap Chinese goods websites. Those are like cheap knockoffs of Amazon, which Amazon has a lot of cheap items itself. That House Select Committee found that those 2 websites are likely responsible for more than 30% of those small dollar shipments that can avoid tariffs into the U.S. and likely half of all de minimis shipments originating from China. So that was one of the things that Donald Trump implemented on China, on trade from China. No more loopholes for these small value items. You don't get to just ship things willy-nilly into this country as long as they're less than like $600, $700 and avoid tariffs. That's gone as well. And so now it sounds like the U.S. Postal Service, as well as Customs and Border Protection, have worked out a way to make sure that those tariffs are being collected from China. Google is abolishing its goal of hiring people from quote-unquote underrepresented groups and are reviewing some of its diversity and equity inclusion programs, according to the Wall Street Journal. In 2020, following the police killing of George Floyd, Google set a target of 30% increases in the leadership representation of underrepresented groups. In an email to employees on Wednesday, Google said it was doing away with this hiring target. Also, its annual report released Wednesday omitted a sentence on DEI that had been included in earlier reports. That statement, which appeared in Google's annual reports between 2021 and 2024, read that Google was, quote, committed to making diversity, equity, and inclusion part of everything we do and to growing a workforce that is representative of the users we serve. That phrase is now gone. Forming its new approach, Google said, are recent court opinions and executive orders by President Trump curbing DEI in the federal government and among contractors. In its 2024 diversity report, Google said 2.7% of its U.S. employees were black and 7.5% Latino. Google said Wednesday it'll continue to expand offices in cities with diverse populations. The company's email added, quote, Google has always been committed to creating a workplace where we hire the best people wherever we operate, create an environment where everyone can thrive and treat everyone fairly. That's exactly what you can expect to see going forward. What you don't expect to see is anybody suing us for anti-white discrimination. Okay, I added that last part in there, but that's the message here. They're afraid of getting sued. Good. Coming up, Milton Friedman revisited. Next. And now here's this. It wasn't that long ago that I featured this exact same clip. It's about 3 minutes and 41 seconds long. It features the famed economist Milton Friedman. And I believe this was either shortly after the election or maybe shortly before the election. And I framed it as being maybe a precursor or a preview of DOGE, but I also couched it as saying, yeah, it'd be nice if DOGE had the kind of power that Milton Friedman explores here. Well, now I think it's interesting to go back and listen to this again after 2.5 to 3 weeks of the Department of Government Efficiency taking a machete to the federal Leviathan. Again, this is Milton Friedman in an interview a few decades ago, talking about how he would shape the federal government and what he would cut.
Keep them or abolish them? Department of Agriculture.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Commerce.
Abolish.
Gone. Department of Defense.
Keep.
Keep it. Department of Education.
Abolish.
Gone. Energy.
Abolish.
How?
Except that energy ties in with the military.
Well, then we shove it under defense.
That's
the little
right.
bit that handles the nuclear,
right, that ought to go under
plutonium
defense.
and so forth goes under defense, but we abolish the rest of it. Health and Human Services?
There is room for some public health activities to prevent contagion. Such a thing as, for example...
So you'd keep the National Institutes of Health, say, and the Center for Disease Control down in Atlanta?
No, not the National Institute. No, those are mostly research agencies. No. That's a question of whether the government should be involved in financing research.
And the answer is no.
Well, that's a very complicated issue, and it's not an easy answer with respect to that.
We'll eliminate half of the Department of Health and Human Services?
Like
okay, one half. There we go. Housing and Urban Development?
Out.
Oh. Didn't even pause over that one. Department of the Interior.
Oh, well, but housing and urban development has done an enormous amount of harm. My God. If you think of the way in which they've destroyed parts of cities under the rubric of eliminating slums.
Jack Kemp.
You know, you remember Martin Anderson wrote a book on the federal bulldozer describing the effect of the urban development. There have been many more dwelling units torn down in the name of public housing that have been built.
Jack Kemp has proposed selling to the current inhabitants of public housing their unit, their townhouse, their apartment for $1 a piece, and just shifting the ownership to the people who live in it.
If you got rid of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, it would be worth doing that.
All right, done. That's gone. Department of the Interior, your beloved National Park Service.
Well, given the problem there is, you first have to sell off all the land that the government owns. But that's what you should do.
But it could be done pretty quickly.
It could be done. You should do that. There's no reason for the government to own. The government now owns something like 1/3 of all the land in the country.
And that's too much. Should go down to zero.
Should go down to, well, not entirely zero, they ought to own the land on which government buildings are.
Okay, terrific. Department of Justice.
Oh, yes.
Keep that one.
Keep that one.
Labor.
No.
Gone. State.
Keep.
Keep it. Transportation.
Gone.
Gone. The Treasury.
You have to keep it to collect taxes.
All right, collect taxes through the Treasury. Veterans Affairs.
You can regard the Veteran Affairs as a way of paying essentially salaries for services of those who have been in the armed force, but you ought to be able to get rid of it.
You should be able to pay it off.
Pay it off.
Pay off lump sums, perhaps.
That's right.
And just get rid of it. From 14 departments down to four and a half.
Fundamental functions. What are its fundamental functions? Preserve the peace, defend the country.
All right.
Provide a mechanism whereby individuals can adjudicate their disputes. That's the Justice Department. Protect individuals from being coerced by other individuals. The police function.
Right.
And now, this is both the central government and the state and local governments. The police function is primarily local and central.
Right.
And those are the fundamental functions of government, in my opinion.
Milton Friedman, famed economist, an interview over 25 years ago about what he would abolish within the federal government. Isn't that interesting? I thought when I first saw that, there's no way that DOGE is going to be able to do anything approaching what Milton Friedman is laying out there. Now, 3 weeks in, it seems like DOGE is basically the culmination, the fulfillment of some of Milton Friedman's, at least his impetus, at least the motivation behind what you just heard there. It seems like it's the fulfillment of that. Are they going to be able to cut entire departments of the president's cabinet? I don't know. It seems like they want to. Seems like they're trying. Seems like they're doing the best they can without actually saying they are. It's gone beyond. DOGE has gone beyond where I really thought it would go. And to talk about this in 2.5 weeks, man, Elon Musk getting the most bang for his buck. And finally, our analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. Poll of the week, I asked you, what do you think the end game, not the end goal, but the end game of the Trump tariff plan will be? I gave you 4 options. A, unwinding globalization. B, short-term trade wins. C, a combination of A and B. Or D, nothing or something else. Here are the results. An astounding and resounding result is C, a combination somewhere between short-term trade wins and unwinding globalization. I think the end goal, I'm not sure if he'll actually be able to realize it, I do believe the end goal is unwinding globalization, at least as far as the United States is concerned. And this might be the last chance, as I laid out earlier this week, this might be the last chance for the United States to do this while it carries a big stick in the global market. You can't just ignore the market, not even for a year, not even for 6 months. You can't ignore this economy for very long if you do business here and expect your business to survive. Whether or not he'll actually be able to get that done, I don't know. So I think in the short term, I think you're going to see some wins there, some better deals for the United States. So that was number 1. 67.5% of you said yes, a combination of unwinding globalization and short-term trade wins. Coming in second place is A, unwinding globalization. You think that this will be the end game, that we will fully be able to unwind from globalization, at least as far as our desires and our auspices in this country are concerned. In third place at 10.5%, short-term trade wins. Do you think that's all that's going to happen here? That's still a positive, at least in the short term. And then in fourth place, D, nothing or other, is at 8%. Here's what you had to say. We'll go down to this. I liked this response. Breakfast of coffee and toast says the end game is going to be World War III with China. Thank you very much for that. Banana Republica says, I think it's just about fairness and stopping people from taking advantage of the U.S. America first in every way. If that's the only thing that's accomplished here, I think that's still a win. Let's go to Follow Truth, who says definitely C, some combination of short-term trade wins and unwinding globalization. Lee Anna Plasticat says saving Americans from death by fentanyl is going to be the end game here. If that's one of the wins or if that's the only win, that's still a pretty big deal. That is a big deal. Tom Cornell says B, short-term trade wins, just a happy little accident or along the way. Okay, that's fine. Still a win. Country Squire says, hard to tell with Trump. He's like jazz musician that never plays the songs the same twice in a row. Rhino Hunter says a billionaire grift. I don't know about that. Tom Buzz, the billionaires are actually going to be the ones that are hardest hit by any sort of unwinding of globalization. This was my point the other day. Globalization has been a hell of a drug to people like billionaires. Get higher and higher margins, stock prices go up and up and up, and you still get unfettered access to the largest economy on the face of the planet. That's a hard drug to quit. Let's end with this. Tom Bozikas says, making tariffs great again, eliminate the federal income tax and reboot American industries. The 16th Amendment is nothing more than legalized theft. I think that's the amendment that regulated or instituted the federal income tax. I do think Donald Trump is serious. He would like to get rid of the income tax. He's serious about that. When was the last time we had a president who was even close to approaching being serious about that? It wasn't just some sort of weird talking point. Herman Cain, he campaigned on the flat tax. That's the last kind of flash in the pan conversation. I guess Ted Cruz to some degree campaigned on tax reform, but actually repealing the income tax, Trump, to my mind, is the first in a long time to do that. That'll do it for a Thursday. Reminder, tomorrow is Ask or Tell Me Anything. You can ask me any question you want. Tell me any news story from your neck of the woods or anywhere else you think needs to be covered on the AM Update. You can make your submissions at the pinned post at the top of my profile on X at Real AM Update. Until then, have a wonderful Thursday. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.